Hey guys, it's Sagar, and in this video, I'm going to compare the cameras on the iPhone 15, 14 and 13. If you are confused between which of these phones to get, or if you are upgrading from the iPhone 13 or 14 and you want to see if the 48 megapixel camera on the iPhone 15 brings along any major improvements, you have clicked on the right video. I have a lot of image and video samples to show you guys, so this video is going to be a bit longer, but trust me, it is going to be well worth it. The weather condition was very overcast in Pune when I got this iPhone 15, and those are not the ideal conditions for a camera comparison video. So I decided to go to Mumbai because I wanted to give you guys some nice image and video samples in sunny lighting conditions. But unfortunately it was raining there as well. So as a last resort, I decided to go to Delhi and Agra because I knew it was sunny over there and I wanted you guys to see a lot of good image and video samples from these cameras. If you appreciate all the efforts which I took for this video, please let me know by hitting that like button and maybe leaving a comment as well. If you are new here, hitting that subscribe button does wonders for the channel as well. So coming back to these phones. While the main cameras on the iPhone 13 and 14 get 12 megapixel sensors, the physical size of the sensor is much bigger on the iPhone 14. The iPhone 15 brings along an even bigger 48 megapixel sensor, but does that really bring along big improvements to its images? Let's find out. Now, if possible, please watch this video on the biggest display that you have and possibly on the highest resolution settings. That way you can see every minute details in these images when I zoom in on them. As I said, it was raining in Pune for a few days and the weather was overcast, so I couldn't take many images there. Just for reference, here are how much details the main cameras on these phones capture when the light is not ideal. While there isn't too much going on these shots, you can still see the iPhone 15 capture more light and information. As I zoom in, you can clearly see that the iPhone 13 is showing the most noise and least amount of details in its images, and the iPhone 15's images seem to be the cleanest with most details and least amount of noise. Now we get to some wonderful images in bright sunny lighting conditions. As expected, all three phones capture amazing shots in these lighting conditions. We don't even need to zoom in to see that all of them have captured amazing amount of details in these sets of images. The only difference we see is the slight variation in the colors from all of them. iPhone 13 seems to have captured slightly cooler color tones, while the other two have leaned on slightly warmer looking tones, which is actually how the weather was. Next up, I have an image of the iconic Taj Mahal. Now the iPhone 13 has the smallest image sensor out of these three, and while its images look amazing, as we zoom in, we see that it is not capturing nearly as many details as the other two main cameras. If you look at this marble tile, it is a bit thicker and has some elements coming out of it, which is clearly visible on the iPhone 14 and 15's images, but it appears to be flat on the iPhone 13's shot. Of course, this is something you can only notice when you zoom in and pixel peep on these images. Otherwise, from this far, I doubt anyone can really tell a difference. The iPhone 13 and 14 capture 12 megapixel shots, but the iPhone 15 captures 24 megapixel wind shots thanks to the newer 48 megapixel image sensor. This allows it to capture noticeably more details in its images. It might not be apparent from this far, but as you zoom in even a bit, you can clearly see the iPhone 15 showing much more details. iPhone 14's images have ever so slightly more details than the iPhone 13, but the difference is very hard to notice unless you zoom in 5 to 6 times. This set of images look almost identical. Once you spend a bit more seconds on it, you notice the iPhone 14 and 15 having a bit more contrast and a clear separation between the things like leaves in the foreground and the monument in the background. Both these phones also had a bit of sharpness to their images, but you have to be actively looking with a keen eye for these differences to be visible. Apple lets us shoot 48 megapixel images with the iPhone 15, and these images clearly have much more details than the other two. If you are someone who crops in on a certain part of your image later on, or if you like to zoom a lot on your images, then you would love to take images in the 48 megapixel mode on this iPhone 15. These high resolution shots also have better dynamic range, and Apple doesn't apply a lot of processing to these images. There is a ton of information in these high resolution shots, so if you want to edit your images later on, you will have a lot of raw information available in these images to play with. iPhone 15 gets the bigger image sensor, which means it is definitely capturing the most amount of details. The new image processing pipeline on top helps it reduce the noise and make the colors look even better. All of this sounds good and the specs look great on paper. But looking at these images from all the phones, could you really tell a difference straight away? Maybe some of you can, and a big round of applause for you guys. But I think for most of the people, all of these images look equally good. The iPhone 15 is capturing more raw data and is performing a lot more computations on its images in the background, and if we zoom in on these images, we do see the difference. But without zooming in, the difference is not very clearly visible. This goes to show how good the cameras on the iPhone 13 still are. It will capture the most noise, and when you zoom in, the images might not be as sharp or detailed as the other two, but it is still doing a very good job keeping up with the newer iPhones. So if the images from all these phones look almost identical, unless you zoom way in and pixel peep to find the difference, what is the use of buying the iPhone 15 or even the iPhone 14? Why not just get the iPhone 13 and call it a day? After all, one can save a ton of money this way. You can actually do that and no one is really stopping you. but there are a few things which I noticed while using all these phones together. While the resulting images might not be that different, the experience of taking these shots was definitely different. All three get OLED displays and they can get very bright outside, but the iPhone 15 gets the brightest, which makes composing images on its display much easier. It also doesn't dim the display as much as the iPhone 13 if you have been shooting out in sun for a long time. I've used the iPhone 13 for a long time and I never felt that it was slow at setting the focus or detecting the edges while taking portrait shots or at processing the images when you review them. But when I used it with the newer iPhones, these ones are so fast that you start noticing little delays on the iPhone 13. Again, the iPhone 13 is not slow, but since the new phones are much faster, these things are a bit more magnified in comparison. Looking at the colors in these images, all three are doing a great job, but there is a small difference in the way they are handling them. iPhone 15 seems to add a bit more punch to its colors in some of the images, trying to make them look more vibrant. It also adds a slight warm view to its images. iPhone 14 is also adding some amount of saturation to the images, and I feel the iPhone 13 is capturing most natural or true-to-life colors in these shots. It does have a slight green tint in some of the images, but it can be taken care of with a single tap in any photos editing app. For this set of images, iPhone 15 has captured the exact colors of the basket. It has not added any extra vibrance or saturation to this shot. The iPhone 13 has added a bit more contrast, and the 14 made it look a bit dull than how the scene looked in real life. All that being said, color is a personal choice and everyone perceives color in a different way. So which of these images you like will depend on your color preference. You get photographic styles on all these phones, which will let you adjust the color, contrast, tone and even the color temperature of your shots according to your liking. So if you don't like the colors coming out of any of these phones, you get to dial in any specific look to your images as you please. Now we come to the HDR shots. All phones do a decent job in situations like these. This is a relatively simple HDR situation and all three have done well to keep the sun from overexposing the sky, and at the same time they have captured a lot of information in the shadows as well. If I zoom in, we see the iPhone 15 has captured the most details and the least noise in the darker or shadowed parts, whereas for some reason iPhone 14 has captured the least details and the most amount of noise in this case. This was a tough situation where the sun was setting behind the tree in the left, so there were a lot of darker areas on the structure on the right, but look at how beautifully the iPhone 15 handled this situation. It managed to bring up so much more light and colors, while the other two just captured darker shots. iPhone has had an issue with the HDR ever since the iPhone 12 or later, and I'm finally glad that Apple managed to solve it with the Smart HDR 5 in the 15 series iPhones. This was another tough situation where the sun was directly in the frame and the iPhone 13 and 14 barely managed to capture any information or details in the shadows. iPhone 15 on the other hand did better than both of them. You can also see the small lens flare in the iPhone 13 and 14's images, but it is not present in the iPhone 15's image. So the new coating on the lens of the iPhone 15 seems to be working to some extent. This was not that challenging of a condition, but even here, we see the iPhone 15 capturing much more information in the shadows compared to the other two. So if you're someone who takes a lot of your shots in harsh lighting conditions or where the dynamic range of the sensor plays a very important role, then you should definitely opt for the iPhone 15. If you guys remember, last year I was extremely disappointed with the minimum focusing distance of the main camera on the iPhone 14 Pro. It didn't let me get close enough to the subject for taking close-up shots. And since the iPhone 15 here is said to use the same 48 megapixel sensor and lens combo as that one, I was a bit worried. But Apple has somehow managed to solve that problem. With the main camera on the iPhone 15, you can now get just as close to your subject as on the iPhone 13 and 14, so the close-up shots look amazing. The subject is in sharp focus, and the background in these close-up shots get a very nice and natural optical blur. Since the image sensor on the iPhone 15 is the biggest, the background in its close-up shots is blurred out the most. Again, the colors or the white balance is a bit different from all of the phones, but other than that, these images look equally good. If you like getting up and close to your subjects, you will enjoy taking close-up shots from either of these phones. iPhone 13 just feels a few milliseconds slower at setting the focus, but I observed this only because I was using all these phones side by side. I doubt anyone else uses these phones like this, so even if you go with the iPhone 13, you won't be noticing this in your day-to-day life. Coming to the ultra-wide shots, all these phones have pretty much the same ultra-wide camera, 12 megapixel sensor with f2.4 aperture. So any difference that we see in these ultra-wide shots is purely based on the individual image processing. The center of the frame is the sharpest from these ultra-wide lenses, and we see similar details from all three. But when we look at the edges, we see similar details in the shots from the iPhone 15 and 13, and the iPhone 14 seems to have captured the most noise and the blurriest looking leaves in this particular shot. While it might be very difficult to tell which of these phones takes the best images or has the most amount of details, it is very simple to hit the subscribe button and takes less than 5 seconds of your time. Thanks to the newer image processing pipeline, iPhone 15 is capturing the sharpest wide shot, and it also has captured the most natural looking colors here. The iPhone 14 tried to make the shadows a bit fade, while the iPhone 13 tried to saturate the colors of the sky and leaves. The wide lens on either of these phones is not the best when it comes to taking images, but it does come in handy when you want to capture a wide scene or show the scale of things. The 48 megapixel sensor on the iPhone 15 enables something called lossless 2x zoom. Here are how those shots compare with the 2x digitally zoomed in shots on the iPhone 13 and 14. iPhone 13 has the smallest sensor, so its 2x zoomed in shots have the least amount of details and the most noise, followed by the iPhone 14 and then the iPhone 15, whose 2x shots basically has the least noise and the most amount of details. I don't know how many of you noticed this, but I see a very processed digital noise and look in the zoomed in shots on the iPhone 13 and 14, while the iPhone 15's images look very natural. Since none of these phones have telephoto cameras, it is nice to have the option to zoom in on a scene and still retain a lot of details. So if you think you're someone who zooms in digitally while clicking images, then going with the iPhone 15 will be your best option. I have said this time and time again that I love to take portrait shots on my phone. In fact, whenever I have people in my shot, I straight away switch to the portrait mode. I think Apple has been listening to me, so they brought out the auto portrait mode functionality to the new iPhone 15 series. What this does is whenever the phone detects a face in your shot, or when you tap on a particular subject to set the focus, the phone will automatically capture the depth information and you can then choose to make that image a portrait shot. It will also let you refocus the image later on. All of this makes the portrait mode on the iPhone 15 that much better. As you can see, all three can take really good portrait shots. Edge detection is almost the same in this shot, but the skin tones look the most natural in the iPhone 15's image. iPhone 13 asks me to move a bit closer to the subject, while the iPhone 15 can detect the edges of the subject from much further away. In this sort of portrait shots, again the iPhone 15 has handled the skin tones and even the dynamic range much better than the other two. iPhone 13 and 14 have blown out the light here and even the brighter parts outside the window way back in the background. But the iPhone 15 managed to properly expose all of the areas in this shot. If I zoom in, you can see that the iPhone 15 is doing a lot better with the cutouts around the hair, whereas the other two have a bit of difficulties getting the hair in focus. So these are small things which make the portrait shots on the iPhone 15 have an overall pleasing look to them. Here, the iPhone 13 makes the shot a lot warmer, 14 tried to make the shot cooler to compensate for the warm lights in the background, and the iPhone 15 did the best job of capturing the colors and skin tones as they looked in real life. Again, we see the cutouts around the hair being messed up on the iPhone 13 and 14's images, but the 15 is doing much better with it. If you somehow feel that the colors in these portrait shots are not right, or if they have a slight tint, or if the contrast is a bit high or low, you can adjust all these things from the photographic styles, and those changes apply to your portrait shots as well. Faces in the portrait shots on the iPhone 15 look the sharpest, and as you can see, it has the least amount of noise even in these artificially lit lighting conditions. When there is ample light, I feel like the colors and skin tones are better from the iPhone 15. But I could tell this only because I have these images set next to each other and I am looking for the differences. I doubt most people using any one of these phones would notice this during their normal day. When taking portraits of objects, all three are doing an amazing job of detecting the edges and accurately cutting them out. I remember the iPhone 14 being the best when I compared it with the iPhone 11, 12 and 13 last year. But the portrait mode for objects seems to have got a lot better on the iPhone 13 with software updates as well. These objects have fairly complex edges, but all three seem to be doing a very good job with the edge detection. Other than the subjects being slightly sharper in the portrait shots on the iPhone 15, all of these images look pretty much the same. Even the colors and white balance in these images seem to be identical from all three. This again goes to show how good the cameras on the iPhone 13 still are. And this is one of the main reasons that it has been one of the best selling iPhones even after the iPhone 14 and 15 have been launched. And just like that, we come to the images which are taken in artificial and lower lighting conditions. Most of the modern day smartphones have got really good at taking images in artificial light. Most of them, like these three, have fairly large image sensors and some sort of OS to help the sensor capture more light, and then the image processing algorithms work their magic to deliver such good looking images. As soon as you zoom in, you will see the bigger sensor on the iPhone 15 doing its magic. The text in the shot from the iPhone 13 is the most difficult to read, followed by the iPhone 14, and then in the iPhone 15's image you can clearly make out the text. Then you will also see a lot of noise in the shots from the iPhone 13 and 14, but you will barely see any of that grain in the shot from the iPhone 15. These are the exact same lighting conditions, yet we see the iPhone 15 doing much better here. This is true for all of the artificial and low light shots. The shots might look similar from all three, but as soon as you zoom even a bit, you can see how quickly the iPhone 13's images start falling apart and how much more details the iPhone 15 has managed to capture compared to the other two. This is so much more important when you have people in your shot. Their faces appear more detailed and sharper in the iPhone 15's images, which is exactly what you would want in your shots. After all, subject of your shot needs to be the sharpest. As we get to even lower light, the bigger image sensor on the iPhone 15 starts taking even better looking images. While the iPhone 13 and 14's images appear to be ever so slightly brighter, you can see that they have not captured nearly as many details as the iPhone 15. Even in this situation, 15 manages to keep the noise levels to a minimum. Now some of these things just don't matter to a few people, and they don't even zoom in on any of their images on their smartphone, so for them, the iPhone 14 or even the iPhone 13 seems to be doing a very good job. The better HDR processing on the iPhone 15 comes in handy in these situations as well. 13 has completely blew up the lights, and the iPhone 14 tried to handle them in a slightly better way, but the iPhone 15 managed to do it the best. Again, in this shot, iPhone 15 handled the light behind these birds in a much better way, and at the same time, it also captured a lot more information in its shot compared to the other two. The iPhone 14 and 15 are not too keen on firing the night mode. The iPhone 13 on the other hand wants to shoot in night mode even as the light gets slightly lower. When all three fire up the night mode, their images look good. But again, iPhone 15's images look much sharper. It even takes the lowest exposure time for all of these night mode images. The new coating on the camera lens seems to be working to some extent in these conditions as well. You can clearly see a lens flare across the shot from the iPhone 13 and 14. But the iPhone 15 did well to eliminate that flare. Now all these images might appear the same, but the iPhone 13 took 3 seconds exposure time, 14 took 2 seconds, and the iPhone 15 captured it in just 1 second. So the 15 takes way less time to capture the same amount of light as the other two. The longer the shutter remains open, more are the chances that the shot will turn out to be blurry. So keeping that in mind, the phone which needs the shortest amount of time to capture the most amount of information is the best one. In this case, that is the iPhone 15. Now that being said, the other two while taking more time are not performing all that bad. So if you're just a casual photographer, or if you don't take most of your images in low light, you can go with the iPhone 13 or 14 and save some money for yourself. Since the wide cameras on all the phones is pretty much the same, there isn't too much difference in the amount of details they capture when the light goes down. Pretty much all the images from these wide lenses look the same, and there is a lot of noise in these shots from all of them. Since the cameras are same, any difference that you might see in these low light wide shots is a direct result of their respective image processing. No matter which of the phones I am using, I might switch to this lens just occasionally when there is plenty of light. In anything less than ideal light, I just switch to the main camera and move a few steps back. Those shots turn out to be so much better than the wide ones. That brings us to the front-facing cameras. All three come with 12 megapixel selfie cameras. Last year, Apple updated the selfie camera on the iPhone 14. It still retained the 12 megapixel resolution, but it got a bigger sensor, wider aperture, and autofocusing capabilities. Combining that with the Photonics engine, iPhone 14 took much sharper selfies than any of the previous iPhones. iPhone 15 gets the exact same selfie camera as the iPhone 14, but thanks to even advanced image processing algorithm, its selfies look even sharper and more detailed than the iPhone 14. It also handles the exposure, colors, and overall skin tones in a much better way. So the selfies from the iPhone 15 are the sharpest and look the most detailed. You will see the same thing for the portrait selfies as well. Faces are sharper in the selfies from the iPhone 15, and just like the portrait shots on the rear-facing camera, it also handles the edge detection around the hair the best. All of these iPhones sadly still suffer from the same issue when you have multiple faces in your portrait selfies. All of them just keeps the faces closest to the camera in focus and blurs any other face which is even a couple of inches behind you. I really hope Apple changes the algorithm a bit and start having all of the faces in the portrait selfies in focus. Here's a video from the front-facing camera of the iPhone 15, 14 and 13. You can see how all these phones are handling the overall colors of the scene, exposure and stabilization when I'm walking around with them. You can also check out which of these phones do you think is picking my voice better. iPhone 15 is set to have Smart HDR 5, which should increase its HDR performance a lot. So you guys look at these videos and let me know if do you think it is handling the dynamic range a bit better than the other two. All three can shoot 4K 60fps videos with all of their cameras. The iPhone 13 and 14 have this small lens flare across because the sun was just outside the frame. But the iPhone 15 is not having that, so yes, the lens coating on the new iPhone is helping it a bit. But in lower light, you will still see the light globes in your shot if you have the sources directly in your frame. Hopefully sometime soon, Apple will find a way to get rid of those as well. The video performance of iPhones has always been the best, and it is no different on these three phones. These are the best options if you are looking for a phone specifically for shooting videos. iPhone 15's videos look ever so slightly more detailed, but you will have to look very close to observe this. While the videos from these phones are already very stable, iPhone 14 and 15 get action mode, which as the name suggests helps the videos be very stable in very tough conditions as well. Here I was running with all three phones, and you can see how the action mode stabilizes the video compared to the normal optical stabilization on the iPhone 13. The action mode makes the videos look so much more stable. You can barely tell that I was running when looking at these videos. The only downside of this mode is that the maximum resolution is reduced to 2.8K instead of the regular 4K. Here's a video zoom test between all these phones. You can switch the lenses on all of them even while you're shooting 4K videos. I started shooting with the ultra wide angle lens, so they can go from the 0.5x lens to the 1x lens, and the iPhone 13 and 14 can digitally zoom in further up to 3x, while the iPhone 15 can still keep on zooming in and go up to 6x. the video starts looking really grainy at this point. But if you ever need to zoom so far while shooting videos, you can do that on the iPhone 15. If you guys saw my camera comparison video last year between the iPhone 14, 13, 12 and 11, you might know that we don't see drastic improvements while looking at these images side by side. Any differences that we see are subtle, but when we look at and compare the images from the iPhone 13 and 15, you will definitely notice a few differences right away. For your reference, here are just the images from the iPhone 13 and 15 compared side by side. We haven't seen much of a difference between the images from the iPhone 14 and 15 in most of the daytime shots unless you zoom way in, so if you are using the iPhone 14, I don't think you need to upgrade just for the cameras. Yes, you can definitely do that if you want better dynamic range or the ability to shoot 48 megapixel shots, but I don't think these are very important for a vast majority of people. But if you are using the iPhone 13 or any phone from before that, you can look at these images and decide for yourself. I don't know if you can tell it over the internet or not, but there is definitely a difference between these images. Ones from the iPhone 15 are noticeably more detailed with a lot less noise. Colors also look richer overall, and the images from the iPhone 15 just look better in comparison. The difference gets even wider if we look at the low light shots. There is just so much more information in the iPhone 15's images. So we have seen over 70 image and video samples from all these cameras, and this year, I think it is safe to say that when you look closer, iPhone 15's images are definitely better than the iPhone 14. The details, almost lossless 2x digital zoom, and much improved dynamic range alone might be enough for many people to either make the switch or choose the iPhone 15 while deciding between which one to get. Just remember, you do have to zoom in some of the cases to see the difference. But at the same time, some of you might not have found the extra bit of details to be that impressive, or maybe you don't zoom in on your shots a lot, or maybe you just don't take a lot of portrait or low light shots with your phone. So the improvements of the iPhone 15's cameras might not be worth the extra price to you, and you guys can go for the iPhone 14. I'm sure you would all agree that the camera on the iPhone 15 is definitely better than the iPhone 13. So if you're looking to upgrade from the iPhone 13 for its cameras or any phone from before that, you can definitely go ahead and get the iPhone 15. Well, the prices for this iPhone 13 might be the lowest they have ever been. If you want a good set of cameras, at least go with the iPhone 14 if not the 15. After looking at all these image and video samples, what do you guys think about these cameras? And if you are going to consider getting any of these phones, which one would it be? Let me know in the comments. If you are going to get any of these phones, I will really appreciate if you get them from the affiliate links in the description section. That is it for this video guys. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to the channel for a lot more quality tech videos like this. You can also check out some of the other videos from this channel. This has been Sagar and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care.